irrigating the young plants, and then carefully harvesting soft lint cotton from the hard bolls until his fingers were numb. Solicitor knew what he deserved. Young John D. had watched his father go over the math based on the market value of the harvest over and over. The cash settlement was essential for the annual purchases his family needed and to his ability to care for his sick wife. As furious as Solicitor was, he dared not speak up. Any public hint of anger, even a calm and measured protest, could result in a lynch mob appearing in front of their home. So when the landowner lied and gave him nothing but a debt against the next year's crop, Solicitor determined that there would be no next year in that place. He decided to take his family and run. John D. climbed into the wagon in silence and sat down behind his mother and father among his 4 siblings and his family's simple belongings. As they made their way up the hilly dirt road, John D. didn't even look back at the tiny house where they had lived, a converted slave cabin just a few miles away from where generations of his ancestors had toiled in bondage. He imagined what runaway slaves must have felt. Emancipation had come decades before my grandfather was born, but black sharecroppers still faced circumstances almost as degrading as those of slavery. They were ostensibly free, yet in reality, they had no rights that white men were bound to respect. They labored without fair pay or any recourse when they were cheated. Those who organized against the white supremacists who owned the land faced violence or death. There were no labor laws that could adequately defend them, only lawless rules that tied them in perpetuity to debt. So they ran. John D. looked forward to wherever his family might go. As they left the state of Georgia, Solicitor made sure to tell his children that they had nothing to be ashamed of, that it was injustice that made them flee up the dusty road that night, not their own wrongdoing. They were God's people. You wouldn't have seen it by looking at their scant possessions, but the Duncans carried an inheritance of their own. They ended up in North Carolina, where the boy grew to be a man in search of an independent life. Soon after his mother died at the young age of 53 and his father remarried, John D. set out on his own. At over 6 feet 2 inches tall and broad-shouldered, he looked like a man even though he was not yet 20 years old. Hoboing on train tops with Obie, he hoped to find a town where he could work as a carpenter or a woodworker. His large and powerful hands were skilled. He knew he could build anything. He had worked constructing cabins and even making furniture for others on the Georgia plantation. He heard that they might be hiring in Thomasville, North Carolina, which boasted one of the largest furniture factories in the state and a massive 16-foot-tall chair welcoming visitors in the town square. In Thomasville, he met Brunelle Rayford. She was the eldest of 6 surviving children and the last in her family to have been born in rural Newberry, South Carolina, 80 miles due east of the Georgia town called Cannon, where John D. was born. The circumstances of their childhoods were also parallel. They were both the children of sharecroppers in rural communities not far from where their ancestors had been held as slaves for generations. Both the Rayfords and Duncans came from a long line of people who survived the unthinkable during slavery, and in freedom built a rich network of family, grounded in independent black churches and schools. In spite of their effort to be truly free people, disenfranchisement backed by lynch law left little room for them to achieve or even to simply be. The Rayfords and the Duncans were among the many black families who, in the first decades of the 20th century, fled from the rural South to the urban South, an internal migration prior to the Great Migration North, in hope of finding better jobs and safety from physical threat. John D. and Brunelle thought that the relative anonymity of a larger town might provide them with opportunities to advance. In Cannon and Newberry, there had been no high school for black students to attend. The one-room schoolhouse in both towns ended at the 8th grade. But in Thomasville, there was a high school for black students. Brunelle was bright, An avid reader of news